All right. Assalamualaikum and a very good evening. So welcome everyone. I'm Dr. Aizulin, emergency physician from University of Malaya, Malaysia. I'll be your moderator for tonight. So our webinar today entitled From the Two Realms, Disaster and Humanitarian Medicine, proudly organized by our Southeast Asia Chapter of the World Association of Disaster and Emergency Medicine, WADEM. We are gathered here today to delve into the critical and ever-evolving field of emergency and disaster humanitarian medicine, guided by the expertise of three distinguished speakers who will share their invaluable experience and knowledge. Our event will start with an opening speech by our esteemed Dr. Muhammad Shazwan bin Adnan, consultant emergency physician and disaster medicine specialist from Department of Emergency Medicine at the Kuliah of Medicine International Islamic University of Malaysia. His insight will undoubtedly set a thought-provoking tone for our session. Following the opening remark, each of our speakers will present for about 30 minutes. We encourage active listening as their presentation promises to be rich with information and perspective from the front line of disaster and humanitarian response. After our final speaker concluded, we will transition to our Q&A session. Please submit your question via the Q&A panel or the Q&A session. This is a unique opportunity to engage directly with our experts, so feel free to ask thoughts and relevant questions. Without further ado, I invite Dr. Muhammad Shazwan to deliver his opening speech for our webinar. Dr. Shazwan, the floor is yours.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good evening and good day to everyone wherever you are. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Safwan, the co-director for the Southeast Asia Chapter for WADEM. I would like to welcome all of you to this webinar, where we hope to explore the profound relationship between disaster and humanitarian medicine. And we hope to delve deeper into the immense potential that lies within the collaboration of these two realms and how it can revolutionize healthcare in the time of crisis. By bridging the gap between disaster and humanitarian medicine, we hope to unlock a world of possibilities. Imagine a world where disaster response teams seamlessly integrate with humanitarian organizations, working together to provide immediate medical care, coordinate resources, and rebuild shattered communities. By leveraging the strength of these both principles, we can enhance our ability to save lives, deliver essential healthcare services, and restore hope to those who are in need. During this webinar, we have the privilege of hearing from distinguished experts who will shed light on the fundamental principles and challenges faced in disaster and humanitarian medicine. Their invaluable insights and experience will guide us toward a deeper understanding of those interconnected fields and pave the way for innovative solutions to the complex healthcare issue that we are currently facing. I encourage all the participants to actively engage in this webinar, as your thoughts, ideas, and questions are vital in fostering meaningful dialogue. Together, let us seize this opportunity to unite disaster and humanitarian medicine, transcending boundaries and working towards a future where no one is left behind. I also extend my heartfelt gratitude to all the esteemed speakers, participants, and organizers who have made this webinar possible. Your dedication to advance in the field of disaster and humanitarian medicine fills us with hope and inspire us to strive for excellence in our work. Thank you everyone for joining us today, and I'm confident that this webinar will enrich our knowledge, ignite our patience, and empower us to make a lasting impact in the life of those affected by crisis. Together, let us collaborate, together let us innovate, and together let us create a better future for all. Thank you for your participation, and I hope you will enjoy the webinar. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Aizudin.
Thank you, Dr. Shazwan, for your kind introduction and opening speech. Moving forward in our journey of exploration within the realm of disaster and humanitarian medicine, it is my privilege to introduce our next esteemed speaker, Dr. Gregory Ciottone. Dr. Ciottone, an illustrious figure, holds the esteemed position of President Emeritus of the World Association of Disaster and Emergency Medicine, WADEM. His academic journey is marked by his significant role as an associate professor of emergency medicine at the renowned Harvard Medical School. Dr. Ciottone extends his expertise as an instructor in the Department of Health Policy and Management at Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health, illustrating his multifaceted contribution to the field. Dr. Ciottone's commitment to medical preparedness is further reflected in his role as Director of Medical Preparedness of the National Preparedness Leadership Initiative at the Harvard University, a testament to his multidisciplinary influence. Additionally, his involvement at the Harvard University Scholar at Risk program showcases dedication to advancement of knowledge and leadership in challenging environment. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming a true visionary and leader in disaster and emergency medicine, Dr. Gregory Ciottone, a world of disaster medicine. The floor is yours, Doctor.
Thank you so much, and welcome everyone. Thank you for spending some time with us here. And I have to congratulate the Southeast Asia chapter of WADEM on putting this together and also being so active. It's really a joy to see, having just stepped down as president of WADEM last spring. It's really I enjoy seeing the various chapters become more and more active, and particularly this relatively new chapter here in Southeast Asia. So yeah, I'm going to try to share some perspective. I really look forward to the discussion that follows our panelist presentations, and I think we're in a very interesting time here in disaster medicine, but also as things overlap with humanitarian medicine and the efforts that we all do to try to alleviate suffering and dying in these events. So I'm going to share my screen. I have a short presentation that I'll try to talk around. As I said, I look forward to the conversation that will follow, and hopefully the question and discussion from everyone. So let's see if somebody just gives me a thumbs up real quick, Mohammed, if you see that screen. You see my screen? Great, thank you. Okay, so as I said, I guess my task here is to talk a little bit about disaster medicine. And as I look around, I see that I have the most gray hair here, so perhaps I could bring a little bit more of a historic perspective. Though I see a little gray hair in your beard there, Srihari. Is that starting to come in a little bit there? So welcome to the crowd, right? So two realms, disaster and humanitarian medicine. It's really interesting, as I'll talk about a bit. But I've had I consider it the privilege, quite honestly, to have practiced disaster medicine for nearly 30 years now, well over 25 years, and seeing the evolution of disaster medicine over that time, with the understanding that disaster medicine preceded me as well. You may be aware that WADEM really was stood up, founded in 1976. So we've been talking about this term disaster medicine for a while now. But it's interesting that when I entered the field back in the early mid-90s, it really was much different than what it is now. In fact, I like to joke to my fellows and students that when I was in their shoes, when I was in your shoes, I could never have predicted what disaster medicine would become and what it is today. I joke that now one of the threats that we have to deal with, of course, is cybersecurity and cyber threats. Well, we didn't have internet really for the most part. We didn't have internet back when I first started in disaster medicine. So if you said to me, "Oh, we have a cyber threat, we have to prepare for cyber threats," I wouldn't know what you're talking about. I would perhaps think back in the old TV show Battlestar Galactica, with the cyborgs, I think they were calling them. So there are things that we are true threats and we have to deal with today that really weren't even in existence back then. So that leads me to believe that there are going to be things later, in your long careers in this field that we really probably can't even predict right now. And that's why it's so important for disaster medicine to evolve and for us to do what we need to do as specialists in this field to promote that evolution, to promote the research and the work in disaster medicine. So yeah, the two realms, it's really, if you want to discuss disaster medicine, we have to really get to the nuts and bolts of what disaster medicine is. And when I try to describe disaster medicine, I say that disaster medicine is the marriage of crisis healthcare and emergency management. You can't have one without the other. And that together forms disaster medicine. And really, disaster medicine and we disaster specialists, by almost, by definition, we only become operational in crises. And a crisis in healthcare, in disaster medicine, really boils down to when the needs outweigh the resources. So I like to say on a daily basis, hopefully our systems are somewhere around here where needs and resources are about the same. When a disaster happens, needs are up here and resources are down here. So when there's that discrepancy, that's when disaster medicine really kicks in, until we can bring the situation back to where it is here. Interestingly, and as we talk about this more and we start bringing humanitarian medicine into this, well, what exactly is humanitarian medicine? I'm really anxious to hear the presentations of my colleagues and discussion about humanitarian medicine. But, a lot of the parts of the world where we do humanitarian medicine, we're doing it there because needs and resources aren't matching up. So, there's overlap there, right? There's overlap with disaster medicine. Now, perhaps the difference is that's an ongoing, discrepancy or ongoing needs outweighing resources that just exists, in everyday practice. Whereas in a disaster, there is an onset of a crisis, whether it's a sudden onset like an earthquake or a hurricane or some sort of man-made disaster, or it's an insidious onset like a pandemic. There is some sort of crisis that's overlaid on top of that humanitarian need that might be already existing there. So again, I'm going to focus on disaster medicine, then we'll have more of the conversation as this goes on. But really, and now I have some gray hair, but I was not around in 1918, which is a picture on the left of the 1918 pandemic. But we've gone to made great strides in disaster medicine. I like to say, we've got a lot of fancy stuff now, right? A lot of technology, a lot of things that we can bring to bear to disasters, and that's good. We need to do that. As part of being a disaster medicine specialist, I firmly believe that we also need to be at that sort of pinnacle, like cutting edge of all the various technologies and other modern techniques that we can bring to bear to disaster preparedness and response. And that's something that really is the onus is on us as disaster medicine specialists to make sure we are utilizing cutting edge technology and processes with our disaster response. And then there's AI. Now, I struggle with computers, all right? So I am not an AI specialist, but clearly AI is going to be a big part of the future, around the world globally, but particularly in healthcare and disaster medicine. Only this past several days, I've been learning new applications of AI, within disaster medicine I had no idea about before. I think AI is going to bring a lot to the table. I think AI is going to be firmly in your future as disaster medicine specialists as you proceed through your career. And I think there's going to be, this is, I think that one area where, as I said before, we can't necessarily predict where disaster medicine is going in the future. This is clearly one area that's the case. Now, AI is going to bring a lot of positive things, I'm convinced, but also it's going to bring some negative things. There are going to be some things that we have to struggle with. I'll talk about that in a moment. With AI, because every time I see something, I see either new technology or something else, I always look at the backside of it too. How can this either be intentionally exploited to do harm, or accidentally to do harm? So we have to look at both ends of that. And I think AI unfortunately, has both sides of that. So the 21st century now has really shown us clearly escalating hazards. No question, whether it's climate change or it's more intentional attacks, terrorist attacks, et cetera. There's clearly escalating hazards, but we also have vulnerabilities that are escalating as well. As you'll see in a moment, there's historic firsts in our vulnerabilities now that just really weren't around 20, 30 years ago. So what are some of those concerning firsts? Well, 2015 to 2023, just last year, was the warmest on record. And that you can't contest that. I'm not going to get into the climate change argument, whether you think it's man-made or it's just natural cyclical event. Regardless, the reality is the world's getting warmer. So just that in and of itself, we need to figure out how to deal with that essentially. Another first, sea levels reached a record high in 2022, and probably in 2023, just haven't seen the data yet. Of course, that goes hand in hand with the global warming and et cetera. So that's something else we're going to have to deal with, because for the first time in human history, there's over 630 million people that are living at an elevation of 10 meters or less from sea level. And that's concerning. If you go back to the picture I had in the prior slide, you can see some of those areas where there's much more vulnerability because of that. So these are things that we're going to have to contend with clearly in the future. We just came out of the COVID pandemic, and we saw for the first time a novel virus emerge that has an R0 value greater than 2, which is a level of transmissibility, in the era of modern air travel. Okay, really, we haven't seen that before. Yeah, in the late, 60s, when we had those relatively smaller pandemics, we had air travel as well. But something like this that was more transmissible than the influenza virus, luckily not as transmissible as measles or mumps, which have an R0 of somewhere around 15, 16, 17, but was high enough that, we saw this global pandemic. And I don't need to tell anybody here how devastating that was on the world for the last couple of years. The other thing, too, is we are now seeing in parts of the world the first time in human history where there's large-scale active warfare occurring in and around nuclear power stations. That's a concerning thing. This is something that, again, is new. It's novel. We haven't seen this before. Hopefully, we're not going to see any, devastating or a problem or accident from that. But again, it's something that has to be on our radar. It's also the first time that AI-empowered weapons can kill humans autonomously. Now, again, I'm not an AI specialist, nor am I a specialist in AI weapons, drones, etc. But I do know that we've taken a step into the beyond with this. Now, as I understand it, AI-enabled drones, for instance, can be launched and then without any human input after that, autonomously decide which targets to attack and attack them. This is, again, the concerning side of AI that we have to keep our eyes on. Cyber, right? Like I said before, first time in human history that healthcare systems' entire IT can be brought down from continents away. And we've seen this a number of times in a number of parts of the world, ongoing. Very concerning. Same thing with the power grid. We've seen how, nefarious actors can bring down power grids, IT systems, healthcare hospitals, and healthcare systems, et cetera. So this is something that has to be on our radar as well. It's also the first time a chemical weapon capable of killing millions of people can be either purchased on the dark web or bought at the street corner of a major city. This certainly is the case in the United States. It's also the case in other places. Of course, I'm referring to fentanyl and fentanyl derivatives, but this is something that's concerning as well. This is clearly a disaster risk, a national security risk, and something that we have to try to solve. And the solution to this is not does not lie entirely in disaster medicine, of course. Solution to many of these things rely on these other systems, geopolitical systems, et cetera. But we need to have these things on our radar screen. And again, there will be more coming in the future. Again, I don't need to tell you that natural disasters are increasing in frequency. Yes. We have had more billion-dollar disasters by a large degree in the last 20 years than we had 20 years prior to that. Even with, taking into account inflation, et cetera. You can see by this graph that water-related and extreme weather-related disasters are taking up a larger proportion of the natural disasters that are striking us globally. Again, this is probably a reflection of the warming and et cetera, and the climate stuff, the change. But these are things that are going to only escalate again in light of the increasing vulnerabilities that we have as a planet, essentially. So there's always going to be a need for disaster response. I don't foresee anywhere in the near future not having the need for disaster teams, et cetera, to go to places where disaster has strikes. Often these places are these large-scale natural disasters occurring in developing nations. They may not have great infrastructure and need that augmentation in response. That's always been the case. The WHO, Emergency Medical Team Initiative, my good friend, Dr. Flavio Salio, who runs that, has really put together a terrific, I believe, terrific system of disaster response teams for these, for these catastrophic events. That's always going to be the case. However, we now need to look at this idea of building local infrastructure. The more that we can build local infrastructure, I think the better off we're going to be globally in our preparedness and response to disasters. And that takes, that brings this idea to bear, this idea of readiness. Now, Flavio and I published this article in Nature last spring, promoting this idea of readiness. So what does that mean? So, you may be prepared to a certain extent, maybe very well prepared, maybe not so well prepared, but your preparation may be one thing. But what is your readiness? How is your system able to respond quickly and efficiently to a disaster, given the level of preparedness that you have. And this is something now that we need to look at. We need to look at what that effect, how we can better our readiness so that we can have that effective readiness, as you see here, which essentially is bringing down the number of resources and the response time required for that disaster response, essentially becoming more efficient. So one of the things that we're going to look forward to in disaster medicine is enhancing our readiness. And I think this is one of the clear areas where we overlap with humanitarian medicine. Humanitarian medicine is there, boots on the ground, prior to a disaster event. And what are they doing? They're increasing readiness. They're increasing the efficiency of the healthcare system. They're increasing disaster preparedness just by virtue of being there and doing what they're doing. So this is clearly an area where we see some overlap between disaster medicine and humanitarian medicine. So the pre and post-acute phase disaster medicine, which is what we are paying most attention to now. Historically, disaster medicine has really been focused on that acute phase response, right? And that's why I think that disaster medicine, really, at least here in the United States, has been firmly housed as a subspecialty of emergency medicine, and that's true, and that probably should be continue to be the case. No, I'm not questioning that, but I am saying that we need to now pay more attention to the pre-phase, but also post-acute phase. With events like Hurricane Maria in 2017, I believe it was, that went through the Upper Caribbean, Puerto Rico, other islands. There's been studies that we've seen clearly. The data has shown that actually more death and dying is happening post-acute phase disaster than in the acute phase, and that's really the responsibility. That's really because of the disruption of the healthcare system. So we need to now really pay attention, I think, also to the post-acute phase of the disaster, in addition to increasing local infrastructure. And what does that mean? I think that means that we need to, quote unquote, reach across the aisle and bring in other specialties into disaster medicine, some of the primary care specialties, the surgical specialties, others, so that we can make sure, if we're going to call ourselves disaster medicine specialists, make sure that we can prepare and respond to the entire disaster, not just the acute phase. So this is be something I think that we promote more and more going forward. And we've done this in my fellowship program now for a number of years. We've been taking in fellows who are not necessarily emergency medicine trained, but some of the other specialties. I think it's important. I think it's also the future and where disaster medicine is going. So I will finish with my part of this presentation just by saying that now more than ever, disaster medicine, humanitarian medicine need to be hand in hand. We need to work together and complement each other, quite honestly. Disaster medicine, we really can't do what humanitarian medicine does on that daily basis. And perhaps humanitarian medicine, needs really disaster medicine specialists when that crisis hits or that disaster hits. But no question, and clearly, we need to be walking hand in hand down this road as we go into the future. So I'm gonna pause now and thank you, and I'm gonna be anxious and interested in listening to my colleagues' presentations and then participating in the discussion as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ciottone, for the very informative explanation and talk just now. So we can see that basically Dr. Ciottone has introduced us to how the history of disaster medicine and the progress and the challenges that we're going to face in the coming future as well as the present time, and how we need to integrate other disciplines as well within the disaster medicine to improve our readiness to face disasters. So next, we'll come back to you, Dr. Ciottone, after this for further discussion. But next, we'll move on to our next speaker, Dr. Wan Abdul Hannan, Wan Abdullah. So Dr. Hannan is a beacon of dedication and expertise and currently serves as a public health specialist in Zoonosis Sector, Disease Control Division, Ministry of Health, Malaysia. His journey is marked by a steadfast commitment to public health, reflected in his various roles within the Ministry of Health as a medical officer in various capacities in Kuala Lumpur General Hospital, as well as the Institute of Medical Research, Malaysia. An alumnus in the National University of Malaysia and London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, Dr. Hannan academic pursuit in medicine as well as public health has equipped him with a profound understanding of global health challenges. Perhaps most notably, Dr. Hannan can be identify or can be prominently distinguished as a co-founder and chief executive officer in an Australian organization named Hospital Beyond Boundaries. Founded on 22nd May 2012, HBB is a testament to Dr. Hannan vision and dedication. This is a non-profit organization recognized by United Nations Young Leaders for the Sustainable Development Goals Initiative, is committed improving the health of vulnerable communities through sustainable healthcare effort. HBB's journey from the mobile clinic to a community clinic and now a maternity hospital in Cambodia is remarkably a story of perseverance and impact. The organization's work in providing essential health services in underserved areas where healthcare is a matter of life and death is truly commendable. Dr. Hannan's contribution to the field has been recognized at various international and national platforms. His role as speaker, organizer, and mentor in numerous conferences and summits underscore his commitment to sharing knowledge and fostering growth in the global health community. As we proceed with our webinar today, we are honored to have Dr. Hannan to share his insight and experiences. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in extending a warm welcome to Dr. Abdul Hannan Wan Abdul Hannan, the world of humanitarian medicine. The floor is yours, Dr. Hannan.
Thank you very much, Dr. Izzuddin. I'll just share my screen for a while. Okay. Can everyone see my screen? Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Izzuddin. Assalamualaikum and good evening if you're participating from Malaysia, or good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are. So basically, first of all, on behalf of Hospitals Beyond Boundaries, thank you very much for having me here, talking on humanitarian medicines and as well as my ground experience on establishing healthcare services to vulnerable communities. So this would be, I'll just be talking around 20 minutes, I guess. So the content of this presentation, a bit of an introduction of humanitarian action, then we'll jump into the principles, the core principles of humanitarian medicines, and then establishment of HBB and its challenges. Sorry, it's redundant over there. So its challenges. So basically, when you talk about humanitarian action, broadly defined as the act of providing material assistance to those in need. So whoever person or people in need of any assistance, that's what we give. That's when we give humanitarian aid. So other than food or material aid that is provided during famine, drought, or natural disaster. And when you jump into humanitarian medicine, so basically it addresses the consequence that human health face due to displacement and conflict, disaster, to assist those whose lives and health are impacted due to such crisis or events. So that is the broad general humanitarian action means. And when you look at the principles, these are just the 4 principles for humanitarian action. Number 1 is humanity, impartiality. 3 is neutrality and independence. So basically, this principle is just principle that is required for all the humanitarian actors for achieving such effective humanitarian aid or assistance to those in need. And this principle has actually been endorsed and adopted in General Assembly in 2 parts, Resolution 46/182 back in 19 December 1991, and then Resolution 58/114 in 2004. So the first 3 resolutions, which is humanity, impartiality, and neutrality, was first adopted in 1991, and independence was added after. So these are the 4 core principles. But if we look at ICRC, there has been another add-on principles. Example, unity, universality, or voluntary service. So this is, but in general, human actors need to comply to these principles for us to achieve such effective humanitarian assistance. So this is in general. So I put star in humanity because humanity is the fundamental concept, and it underpins all the humanitarian network required. So human suffering is addressed wherever it is found. It protects life, dignity, and health by ensuring respect to human being. So basically, these are the motivating principles So the motivation for offering assistance rather than the manner in which the assistance is being carried out. So this is promoted with mutual, this humanity principle, it promotes mutual understanding, friendship, cooperation for lasting peace for all the human beings. Then we go on impartiality. So impartiality guided on the basis of need alone. There are three important elements here you need to look at. Number one is non-discrimination, proportionality, and no subjective distinction. So basically, it gives priority to urgent cases, and it is disregard of the races, or gender, religions, or political opinion. And this is implemented by, supported by three elements. And then you go to neutrality, which human actors do not take sides. So basically taking sides when you give humanitarian aid or assistance, or we're giving help to marginalized communities, we should never take sides in hostilities, not guided by political, racial, religious, or ideological considerations. And the fourth one is independence. So it means autonomous from political, economic, and military. So in other words, in terms of independence, particularly in some of the NGOs where donors make contribution for the operational activities for that organization. So it's always, it has to be absence of other donors, decision. It should be independent on its own. So it should be focusing on the mission and the best practices for that particular organization. So to make things short, these are the core principles. Humanity, basis, its motivation, basis is inherent dignity of each person. Impartiality, basically equality, assistance based on the need alone, and neutrality, you do not take sides, and independence, it is autonomy from others, freedom of motivation is always to your organization. And let me bring back you to a bit of history in Cambodia, because HBB is registered. I'll be talking a little bit detail on HBB later on, but HBB is being registered as an NGO in Malaysia, but we fully operationalized in Cambodia. And the reason why I put this one, it happened 50 years ago, almost 50 years ago, Khmer Rouge, in which the Pol Pot regime orchestrated the killing of innocent civilians because they want people to be classless. So if you look at the history of Khmer Rouge, which happened in 1975 through 1979, the ideology of communism is being implemented, in which everyone is classless, no one is superior than the other, and it really is about pushing people to become farmers. So at this point in time, if you look at it, the history and then the experiences faced by the people affected during this era, even if you have spectacles on, it means you're a threat to the regime, because it shows that you're educated, and no one should be should have that level of education. Everyone has to be the same. So in that sense, those people who are perceived as a threat will be killed or will be forced to do labor work and all that. So because of this, it is estimated about 1.5 to 2 million people died, and it's about 1/4 of that population during that time. The reason why I put up this ethnic groups, because I want to point out that in Cambodia, Khmer are the majority of the population, which make up 90%, and the rest are all minorities, the Cham people, the Vietnamese, and Lao. So these are the minorities. When it comes to occupation, always the minorities being targeted because they are the easy targets. So this is what happened. The Pol Pot regime, they targeted the minority first. So it goes back to the basic principles of humanitarian action, in which everyone has to be equal, treated equally. Everyone has the right, regardless of their race or the ethnic groups. So this is what happened back 50 years ago, almost 50 years ago. And then This is HBB comes in, hospitals beyond boundaries. So this is what it looks like in 2015, where we, very small, it's a 3 container, which we transformed to become an outpatient department clinic to see patient. And this is how it looks now that we have expanded the services. So what we are operating is actually based on post-war. So it's during peacetime. I like to reiterate what Dr. Greg just said just now. So post and pre and post preparing for readiness. And this is what means I would chime in on that, because this is rebuilding the infrastructure and the communities that has been marginalized because of that. I'll be talking a bit of a history of why we came into Cambodia. So HBB is a non-profit organization. We are registered on the 22nd of May 2012. We are dedicated towards improving the health of vulnerable communities. That our action is very much dependent on the humanitarian principles, the 4 core principles, and we achieve this by establishing hospitals and clinics run by the local communities. And we're talking about local communities are those the minorities. So we want to build up the local communities over there, and we do not fully. Our operation is not fully dependent on funding, because we know that eventually funding will run out and you will be depleted with funds and eventually cannot sustain. So what we did is we are going through social health enterprise. So this social health enterprise simply means we are getting the local communities to work for the hospital, to work for the clinic, and it is profitable. So if you compare to the other hospitals, it is offered at a lower price, lower services to be paid. But we need some profit because it means sustainability. Sustainability is the key to this. We cannot always depend depending on fund, right? So this is our core team members. It was me and Luffy founded this back in 2012. So at that time, I was still a medical student in National University of Malaysia. We were still student at that time, so haven't graduated yet. So the first challenge is always you are too young to start this. Why do you have this big idea of building a hospital? You have not graduated yet. You do not have the authority to use the title doctor yet. But this is what we aim for, and this is what we aim 10 years ago, and it has materialized. So alhamdulillah for that. We are made up of a team of 12 of various backgrounds. We have dentists, we have accountants. So we are the ones planning for this as a team, right? So why did we start this NGO? So it was back in 2012, where it was me and Luffy. This was me years ago, so very young, young and innocent. So we joined one of the conferences for medical students. This has introduced me to the field of public health, which eventually I end up becoming a public health physician in Malaysia. So in one of these this session, it was a conference by medical student, IFMSA. It was in Mumbai. So we were brought up to one of the hospitals located in the middle of the slum area. So we know that slum area is the vulnerable communities, overcrowding, poor sanitation, and that is the perfect condition or environment for outbreaks to happen. Skin diseases, food poisoning, everything, you just name it. So that's the basis of this, and this upper picture is taken on top of one of the hospital in Mumbai. We were brought up. So what caught our attention at that time was that the hospital is being run by the slum people. So you're giving them opportunity to get out of the poverty cycle, and eventually you get to improve their health at all level. It's a slow progress, but it's progressing. So it's always nice, to have small step goes a long way, right? So that's what we believe in terms of the sustainability. And then why Cambodia? Opportunity came in which one of the teachers in Cambodia, we had a meeting with him, and then at that time, very young, enthusiastic medical students, we would ask, what is the challenge or the required the issues with Cambodia? Because if you look at historically, you look when we celebrate Korban, and it's always Malaysian going to Cambodia to do Korban. So it's always Malaysian to Cambodia because we share the same grassroots. One of the question asked to the teacher is what in terms of the healthcare, what is going on over there? So he told us that at that point in time, this marginalized community, the Cham people of Cambodia, they're still being, they're still in a state of shock, because of the minority being targeted. So in terms of the progress for that particular minorities, it's not that significant. So we thought that even there was a condition in which a pregnant lady cannot afford to go to hospital. Basically because most of the time in Cambodia is out of pocket money. So if you cannot have, if you do not have enough money, you cannot go to hospital. So she ended up delivered the baby next to a train station, which we thought that at this 20s, you should have safe delivery, right? So that is the turning point of why do we think that we should make something to Cambodia. And if you've ever been to Cambodia, there's a lot of hospitals built by the international agencies. There's Thailand hospital, there's free children hospitals in Cambodia that is funded by, if I'm not mistaken, in Switzerland. These are the actions being taken on. And then that's our aim. So we thought, how could we materialize this, right? So first thing first is to get funds. So it's always that you have to have something to start first, right? So this is our very first fundraising activity, which we cannot even afford a booth, because a booth at that time cost, I think, around 2,000 ringgit, which is equivalent 2,000, 3,000 ringgit, equivalent to around $300 US. So we cannot afford that. So we just asked the organizer if we could be in between booth. So this is the booth we had, and we managed to get 2,000. So it's always nice to have a small start, and then we build up from there. And to build a hospital at that time, it was estimated cost around 1 million. So we do not have such money back then. So what we need to do, first thing first, is we need to engage with the local community. So this is what we did in the very beginning of Hospitals Beyond Boundaries. This is our first engagement with the local communities, the Cham people. So we did a screening in one of the school, which is where the teacher worked in my previous slide, if you remember. So this the first screening event. So it's really is about screening, and then getting to know the local people. And eventually, after 2 years of fundraising activity, we managed to secure enough fund to start small, because we do not want to wait until 1 million, because I'm not sure if we could ever manage to get that. So we start small. So this is the fundamental of giving access in terms of healthcare for the marginalized communities. This is when we transformed 3 container into an outpatient department clinic, and we had a very humble inauguration of this, attended by the local authorities. Very small celebration. So this is where opening. So it's very new and very it's distinct at that place. So this is how it looks like at night. So at times when this happened, I was in my housemanship training. I usually go there over weekend, monthly basis, and sometimes I just sleep in this container. It's really nice experience actually. So after a few years of operating, we've managed to get some profit and get some donors to invest in this. So we've expanded the service into maternity center. This is when we set up operation theater and labor rooms for safe delivery. So this is the discussions we had at that point in time. We need to choose OT light, ventilators. So it was all history. Apart from that, we do collaborate with the local NGO from Malaysia. Training. This is training being given to the midwife in HBB, and we give some food package to single mothers. Right. So this is some of the examples. We are reaching out to the marginalized communities, which they have very limited access. Some of them have to travel through boat, and it took like 2 to 3 hours to reach our facilities. So this is part of the humanitarian activities. We bring in participants, or we bring in, these are all my previous lecturers, professors, pediatrics, FMSs, family medicine specialists, to join us. This is a visit paid by the Secretary General at that time to HBB. So what we do, we bring trainings to the center, which we bring obstetrician and gynecologists here to teach on suturing, basic sutures class. This is part of my team. We have anesthesiologists and pediatric surgeons where we perform hernia repair. This is our operation theater. This was me assisting one of the hernia repair for the kids. This is some of the example, and this is picture of me with the 5th baby delivered in our hospital, in our center. So this was the pictures. I think this was in 2018, if I'm not mistaken. This is how it looks now. So really is our client, our patients coming from the marginalized community, because we offered services, especially those who are unable to provide and unable to pay for the services. They are being subsidized in our hospital. So really is the mission is to improve health of vulnerable communities. We empower communities. So all of our workers actually local. None of them employed by none of them are Malaysian. So all within that surrounding communities. To provide healthcare services to patients without discrimination. So all are welcome to receive the services offered by HBB, and this is what we are operating now. We have our outpatient department, 24 hours emergency services. We have inpatient with 20 beds, surgical procedures, pediatrics, and obstetric and gynecology as well. So until 2015, until 2023, we have treated over 20,000 outpatients. We have reached out to almost 60,000 patients through medical outreach and mobile clinics. We have done over 100 hernia repair, 300 surgical procedures, maxillofacial surgery, 50 cases plus, free surgical cam, 100 plus cases, and mass circumcision, 17,000. So HBB is famous for circumcision, so people will always look for HBB to go, because we're bringing in not just the local specialists, but we're bringing also Malaysian pediatric surgeons coming in to do circumcision in this center. So this would have been my last slide. Thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to answer any of the questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hannan, for the enlightening talk, covering your journey as well as the experience that you had building up HBB from the beginning, even during your medical student years up to now, which currently running what I call that, a hospital overseas. So we'll go back further to discuss about the challenges you face during your time building up HBB. But next, we'll move on to our third speaker. It is my honor to introduce Dr. Srihari Cattamanchi. Dr. Srihari, an esteemed emergency physician from India, has an extensive academic and professional background that spans across several critical areas, including emergency medicine, disaster medicine, humanitarian assistance, pre-hospital emergency care, clinical research, and also public health. His academic journey is marked by significant achievement, including postdoctoral research fellowship in disaster medicine in Harvard Medical School and BIDM from 2011 to 2013. During his postdoctoral fellowship, Dr. Srihari focuses on building disaster resilience, initially in Haiti, and subsequently extended his expertise to disaster response and humanitarian assistance in the Philippines as well as Nepal. Further enhancing his academic credential, Dr. Srihari completed his Master in Public Health at the prestigious Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, Baltimore, United States, between 2014 and 2015. Dr. Srihari's commitment to medical education and disaster medicine is evident from his tenure at Sri Ramachandran Medical College and Research Institute, Chennai, India. Here, he served as a consultant as well as adjunct professor in the Department of Emergency Medicine, focusing on developing the Faculty of Disaster Medicine in India through various educational initiatives from 2016 to 2017. Since 2017, Dr. Srihari has been working with International Committee for the Red Cross Geneva as health delegate as an emergency specialist. His contribution has been global, from training medical professionals in Gaza on emergency trauma care and mass casualty preparedness and response to conducting similar training in Beirut, Lebanon. For his remarkable contribution to emergency disaster humanitarian medicine, Dr. Srihari was honored with the IFEM Humanitarian Award in 2020. Currently, he is the Regional Emergency Physician of the Asia Pacific region for the International Committee of Red Cross, ICRC, coordinating emergency department project across the region. His recent deployment in Ukraine as part of Rapid Deployment Unit, Emergency Medical Mission with the ICRC, further highlights his commitment and expertise in the field. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in warmly welcoming the true pioneer and humanitarian, Dr. Srihari Cattamanchi, where the two worlds meet. The floor is yours, Dr. Srihari.
Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody, wherever you are. Thank you for the introduction. Just to clear that I'm between missions. I finished my mission in Bangkok, and at present I'm waiting for my next mission to Baghdad. So at present I'm on holidays, so I'm not the regional coordinator anymore. So now coming on to my presentation. In this session, we'll talk where the two worlds meet. It's between disaster and humanitarian medicine. Mainly, I'll focus on the challenges which we face, because previous two speakers spoke on disaster medicine and humanitarian medicine, and I don't want to spend more time on that. But if we have both together, and where we have to work in, so how do we work and what are the challenges on the way forward? So that's the main thing I would like to focus now. My disclaimer is that the views expressed in this presentation are solely my expert opinion and not that of the International Committee of the Red Cross. Now I want to bring up a new term, like Greg brought up what is disaster medicine and what is humanitarian medicine, but I want to bring up a new term called complex humanitarian emergencies. This is a type of disaster event. It can be an earthquake or anything, any disaster event or incident which has occurred, and which results in a lot of social, medical, and many times political circumstances make it more worse than what it is to be. And this might lead to a lot of suffering for the people who are affected by it, and might cause them to be displaced, and also requiring extra assistance and humanitarian aid from abroad, outside the context which they can't manage. And this is usually worsened because of poverty, or they have very huge population or population explosion in that area, or they might be due to other human causes or natural disasters and wars or conflicts, which can worsen the situation. Sometimes one of the best examples is like take Bangladesh, which is a poor country, and where they're receiving refugees from Myanmar, Rohingya refugees in millions. A small town called Cox's Bazar, it has 2 million people, and it receives another 2 million people of refugees. And in that, they get every year cyclones, tropical cyclones. So then there's a disaster. And over that, they get COVID, pandemic, and everything. So this forms, everything is a small events, and all combined together, which makes the situation worse. It's a complex humanitarian emergencies. And this, even if it also involves a conflict, an armed conflict, that worsens more drastically the situation. So this is where I want to focus on, bringing the both worlds of disaster and humanitarian medicine together and see the challenges we face. Example, at present, there are more than 100 armed conflicts globally, but most of us, we talk about the latest 2 conflicts is Ukraine and Gaza. But we forget a lot of other conflicts. If you see in the list here, on the left-hand side, all of these conflicts are happening either in Caribbean, like in Haiti, or in African countries, which is least developed countries, or having this conflicts for a long time. And they have all the problems, poverty, population explosion, and then social factors, everything which is affecting them. And then we see conflicts which is happening in Middle East, where the conflicts has been for a long time. Even though the country was a developed country, due to the conflict, it has affected the population severely. And recently, Ukraine and Gaza, even though the country is a developed country, but due to the conflict, it has affected them severely. So the response is going to be different to each place. It's not going to be the same complex humanitarian response, or the disaster or humanitarian response is going to be. Each context has a different response that you need. So let's take 3 of these conflicts here and just have a small overview, so that tomorrow next slides, if we go in, we will understand how our responses can be better. So for this, I chose Myanmar, Ukraine, and Gaza to have a small brief discussions. We're not going to the politics or deep inside, because that's going to cause a lot of issues. So I'm just talking about purely on humanitarian and disaster response. So let's take the Myanmar conflict. This crisis is going for more than 40 years, but we'll talk about the present crisis, which has escalated after the coup in 2021, the military coup. The situation was worsened because of the coup, with escalating fightings, surging displacement, extra protection threats, having a large number of population displaced. It is happening in 4 different areas, zones. You see here, it's happening all 4 different zones. Next to Bangladesh, next to Thailand, and north near to Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam, those areas. So it's in 4 different directions. That's called ethnic violence happening along with the military leaders. And this, in 2024, Humanitarian Needs and Response Plan states that 1/3 of the population of about 18 million people need humanitarian assistance, and they are severely affected due to this crisis. And most of the problem or brunt is by the children. 6 million children are affected due to this. And there is a huge amount of malnutrition, food insecurity, no healthcare services, and there's a lot of security issues. And there's no formal education of medical education, these 4 regions, because they are in rebel areas. There's no medical schools, anything for the last 20 years. So the medical quality of medical care is really not good. It's really poor standards. And in this situation, if you want to respond, then our response is going to be totally different. And one of the biggest challenges we as humanitarian workers have is access to these 4 areas. We get access to the government-controlled areas, but not to the rebel areas. So then you can't provide any humanitarian aid there since you don't have access. So they use now the humanitarian workers are trying to work through other countries like Thailand, Bangladesh, Cambodia, Laos, and other countries are trying to work and see providing healthcare, providing support to these communities, but it's not full support. So this is one of the conflicts which we need to think about when you talk about how we're going to respond in a humanitarian crisis. Next one is Ukraine. Ukraine has been facing a problem, large invasion from Russia, and since February 2022. It also had the same problem for last 10 years in Donetsk and Luhansk region. The war in Ukraine caused a lot of deaths, destruction and increase in humanitarian needs. A lot of hospitals were destroyed, healthcare facilities were damaged. A lot of civilian infrastructures, schools, homes, water, sanitation, food and jobs were lost. And there's about 14 million people were affected due to this conflict. And nearly 15 million people will need humanitarian aid in 2024 for this coming year. That's what OCHA is predicting. So this is also another crisis, but most of the world's attention was diverted to this crisis than the other crises which were happening, like other conflicts, the other 10 conflicts which I showed you previously. So there was a lot of infusion of aid, everything, but still the conflict is so worse and that they need more aid even in 2024. Next one is the Gaza conflict. This conflict happened after the humanitarian crisis in Gaza has been worsening due to the ongoing conflict between Israel and Palestine. The Israel offensive in Gaza Strip, launched in the wake of deadly rampage by Hamas militants in southern Israel on October 7, 2023, has displaced more than 2.3 million people within the 45-kilometer strip and caused a humanitarian crisis. Already the strip is overcrowded, and then you push people from one part of the strip to the other part. It caused a huge problem. And the situation is getting worse day by day, and it's already in more than 100 days since the conflict has started. According to latest updates from OCHA, tens of thousands of people in desperate need of food, water, shelter, health, and protection. The Gaza health authorities have reported about 25,000 people have died, and more than 50,000 people have been injured. And more than 70% of them are women and children who have been affected due to this conflict. And if you see the healthcare system in Gaza, they are facing several humanitarian crises as a result of the conflict. Due to the Israel siege, hospitals are facing lack of fuel, and they are relying mainly on backup generators. And now, during the first 2 weeks, and later there's no fuel at all, so they have to shut off the generators, and the hospital has to shut down electricity. Due to this shutdown, a lot of children in NICU died because of this cause. And there's also attack on healthcare staff. So large number of medical staff and ambulances and health institutions and multiple hospitals were destroyed. The Gaza health minister recently stated that the whole health system has collapsed completely. On 23rd January 2024, that's yesterday, WHO surveillance systems attacks on healthcare worker. There's a website which showed that around 850 attacks have happened on healthcare facilities and healthcare personnel, and around 600 healthcare staff have died in the last 100 days due to this conflict. So this is the situation we are facing at present in different contexts. I'm not, when we go for discussion, we're not talking only on Gaza, Ukraine, or Myanmar. It's just to give you an idea about what you're going to be facing in case of a complex humanitarian crisis. And then you need to think about how you're going to be responding. It's not the same way what you respond to disaster or what you respond in other normal humanitarian crises. So you need to think mainly my safety. We are under attack. We are under problem. It's not only in Gaza or everywhere. This problem is globally everywhere. during conflict. The healthcare staff have been attacked. So that's one is there. So safety and security. So thinking in this mind, how are we going to be responding? So this is a small detailed diagram explaining a comprehensive response to deliver emergency care in a complex humanitarian crisis. It involves various systems, so it is not that it's supposed to be implemented just during a humanitarian crisis. You should be already present in the country, you should be knowing the systems, you should be in place, and you should have plans in place in case this crisis happens or emergency happens. How should I have a multi-approached response to this crisis? So it starts from first aid, training the community members on first aid in case, so that they can resuscitate the patient and transfer them as soon as possible to the health facilities, because the health system is already weakened, so they need to be providing minimum basic first aid to transfer the patient. So it starts from first aid in the community level. Then the next one is going to be affected is mainly primary health care. The population has been displaced. When the population is displaced in this type of conflict, then they lose access to their primary health care. So then they don't have the daily medications for diabetes and other hypertension, all the other causes. And maternal and child health is also neglected. And elderly people also suffer from this. So we need to find ways and have a plan, a structured plan, how we can provide this primary health care services. And other approach is pre-hospital approach. We need to see an emergency medical system should be in place. We need to work with national societies like the National Red Cross Society or Ministry of Health or civil defense or other EMS providers to provide pre-hospital emergency care. Then coming to the hospitals, we need to see that there's access to the hospital. So with the pre-hospital system, if it's there, then the ambulances can provide access to the hospital. But if the roads are damaged, then it's going to be difficult reaching the hospital. Or if the conflict is ongoing, then the people can't reach the hospital. Or if they reach the hospital is not safe and the hospital is being attacked, then that's also a problem. So access is very important. Access to healthcare is important, which we need to advocate for and ensure that it's in place. Once we have access to healthcare, then we need to provide immediate emergency medical care, surgical, orthopedics, vascular, surgical care to them, and also reconstructive surgery for burns should be provided. And along with this, maternal and child health care system should be in place, because even if wars are going on, deliveries are going to be happening. Deliveries are not going to be stopped just because there's a conflict. So we need to ensure there's maternal and child health activities or programs in place, and the required healthcare staff are in the ground to provide that care. But with all this care, still there need to be safety for the health staff and safety for the health facilities to provide this care. Along with this, there's also need to have a good water, sanitation, and electricity supply and waste management in place. So we need to work with our engineering colleagues, WATAB colleagues or WATSAN colleagues, and ensure that these facilities they can maintain these facilities and ensure these facilities are running, either through solar power or generators or through the power grid. So they should ensure that the systems are in place. And we also should come up with contingencies plans, like if the attack is here, what should our response be? If it's an orange phase, the yellow phase, red phase, what should our responses be for each of these phases? And then we need to come up with a plan and respond to that. So we need to come up with a contingency plan. Also, we need to work with the hospital and with the Ministry of Health and with the community to come up with a mass casualty preparedness and response plan. And we need to practice and drill and have the system in place. Example, in Gaza, the healthcare facility is functioning now also because they had numerous plans, numerous preparedness activities and mass casualty drills happening all throughout. And they had previous wars or conflicts which helped them to build resiliency in their health system. So that's what is helping them to still run in such a devastating situation. Along with this, it's also important to work on providing protection for the civilians and vulnerable people, and also for healthcare staff and other health facilities. So we need to also think about protection activities in place. And many of the civilians are detained as political prisoners, or there are soldiers who have been captured and detained as prisoners of war. So even they need healthcare. So we need to think and see how are we going to be providing healthcare for them as a humanitarian organization. And most of the people have lost their jobs, no livelihood, no money. They need something to have the daily needs. So we need to come up with the plans on having livelihood programs. Because most of the conflicts are going to be happening for years, sometimes months and years. Like we've seen now, Ukraine conflict, more than 1.5 years, it's going on, and it will be going on. So we need to have systems. So we can't be waiting. Okay, let the conflict get over, then we'll create for programs, everything. So that's not the way. So we need to be now itself thinking on, in case the severity reduces, then how we can think about livelihood for the people who are affected, and how to take care of them. And other major program is physical rehabilitation. You treat the patient, you take care of the injuries, but you need to rehabilitate them. If they need prostheses, they lost the leg, we need to put the prostheses and train them, exercise them, and again, ensure that they have a good livelihood back into the community. And they also have mental and psychosocial support to get back into the community. And also we need a robust program on mental and psychosocial support, not only for the people affected by the conflict or the injured people, but also for healthcare staff who are responding to these patients, because even we as healthcare staff have been affected by this conflict. So we need to have a robust program in for the healthcare staff. So all these activities will help you in delivering adequate emergency care response during a crisis. So for me, in my years of experience working in conflict, at least the last 6 years in different conflicts zones, I came up with these challenges, which I've listed here, which are few challenges which I face responding during conflicts. So coming on to the access. So main problem is we go in a team. Like example, I've been to 3 or 4 deployments where we go as a team, we wait in the border because you don't have access to enter. They say, no, you don't have green light, the country is not allowing you and everything, then the visa process, everything, because unless you get a visa, I can't go. So so the access is one of the problems. And even though you get access, you go in, still there's a lot of things like you need to get permission from both the sides to go and work in the hospital so that the hospital is not targeted. Or if you're having an ambulance, you need to get permission from both the conflict sides to work. So that access is also needed. So every day access, you need to get permissions to work in. Or you need access to the front line to pick patients and bring them to the hospital so you can treat them in the hospital. So this is one of the biggest challenges we faced. And also access for the patients to reach the hospital or the health facility. That's another biggest challenge we are facing. So main thing for this is we need to talk about IHL, tell them that healthcare staff are not to be the targets. They also not to block access to patients to reach the facility, because that is also healthcare in danger, or violence against healthcare, stopping access to healthcare. So they need to be provided access to healthcare. So we need to talk to the government, the police, the both factions, fighting factions, and see that we create awareness on this. Next one is healthcare in danger is one of the important problems I've seen, which has been increasing all throughout the years. In Ukraine, they found that every day, more than 4 attacks have been on an average in Ukraine. So one of this, here you can see the map of showing all the attacks which happened on healthcare facilities in last 10 years. So it's about 21 countries. It's not only a problem in one country, it's globally spread wide about. And so this problem is a big problem in all across the world, and we need to find solutions on how we can tackle this and stop healthcare violence against healthcare staff. And here you see, compared in the last 10 years, Gaza has seen incidents of attacks, highest number of attacks, that's 2,000 attacks on healthcare. It can be on anything. And next was in Ukraine. Then we see Myanmar, Afghanistan, Syria, Yemen, all the way it comes around. So this number of attacks, we need to see also where it is happening. If you take a graph and put it on every month, how many number of attacks happen, we can clearly see in 2018, during the Syria conflict, there's a mild rise. Then you go into May 2021, it was during the Israel-Gaza conflict in 2021, there was a steep rise 1 month and then the attacks are reduced. Again, in March 2022, you see that in the Ukraine conflict, there's a steep rise. And again, in October 2023 to December, we see during the Ukraine conflict, the steep rise and fall in this thing. So this incidence clearly states what is the cause. And now if you go to, there's totally in the last 10 years, there's been 6,200 attacks on healthcare. And among that, there's 1,800 healthcare staff who have died and 4,000 healthcare staffs who were injured. And this happened in overall 21 countries. And the health facilities were attacked in 3,000 incidents. And ambulances were attacked in 1,600 incidents. About 3,000 healthcare staff were affected due to this attacks on health facilities. And patients, around 1,200 patients were affected because of this healthcare incidents, attack on healthcare workers. And if you see what type of attacks, we need to know what type of attacks. Is it just blocking the road, or they're bombing the hospital, or they're shooting you? So you can see here, it clearly states it differs from heavy military equipments to individual equipments like guns, also sometimes obstructing you access to the healthcare facilities, and sometimes psychological attack also. Psychological violence, and there's also physical assault, and there's also sexual violence which is happening. So all these there's different types of healthcare incidents which has happened. Now how do we address this? It's mainly, there's two prongs. One is to protect ourselves. So we need to make sure that we are neutral and impartial. That might give us a protection, saying that we're working both, we're not taking sides of to the east side of the conflict. We have good negotiations with both the sides, and we get permissions from them. And we have visible signage saying that we are healthcare staff, or a healthcare facility, or healthcare ambulance. That's what. And we move in convoys, and also to protect ourselves by stray bullets or this thing. So we need to better wear vests, helmets, and also bulletproof vests and helmets to protect ourselves, and also be trained in CBRN. In case there's a CBRN incident, how do you escape out? So you need to have the equipment, gear, and you need to be trained in using them. And also if you need an antidote or narc kit with you, so that you can be trained in it, and you can use it, and you can save yourself and get out. It's not to respond, it's to protect yourself and get yourself out of the situation. And last, also, you need to have a de-escalation training. Like in case if violence happens, how do you de-escalate the situation? This can be used in normal ED violence activities, or it can be also used in a conflict zone, where you can de-escalate the situation if something is happening, and you can get yourself out of that incident. And also, it's very important to have public awareness to the public. You can say that healthcare workers should not be attacked. It's we need to follow rules of war. IHL should be followed during war, and so we need to talk about this, make sure the public is aware, and also train the soldiers and the other armed groups, non-state actors, armed groups also on IHL. So that's very important. And this way we can prevent attacks on healthcare facilities. Another problem I found is coordination, communication, networking. There's a huge number of NGOs, a huge number of actors who come and play in a conflict or in complex humanitarian emergencies, and they start competing amongst each other instead of supporting each other, coordinating and doing the work. So it's very important for us to have this communication with them, and we need to take it forward, working together, networking together. It can be from various NGOs, local communities, Red Cross societies, civil defense, or military services, because they might provide you access wherever needed, and they might provide you the needed support, logistical support, or even some stuff which you needed. Next is there's always a problem getting medical stuff inside the country, or medical logistics. Like during Ukraine conflict, we found that there's a huge scarcity of first aid kits or IFAC kits, or even tourniquets we couldn't find in the market. There's a whole global scarcity during that time. And where do you going to procure those? So you need to find systems in place where you can have your constant supply of all these equipments, and how we can get them into the country. And then also there's a problem of drugs, narcotics, and how are we going to use them, and where do you procure them, and how do you have import license into the country, and how can you utilize it inside the country? So you need a medical logistics with you and a pharmacist with you in your team to help you in utilizing this. And also you need storage space in the country, and where is it safe to store in a conflict? Everywhere it's getting bombed, and where can you store your stuff? And if you store it in one place and it gets bombed, then where are you going to do? So it's very important to find a safe medical warehouse and also transport, so that you can transport them within the context and also get it into the country and outside the country. So we thought of, in Ukraine, we're thinking about putting in containers where you can keep moving them in case if there's urgent need. So that was one of the thoughts we were having. Other one is also operational continuity. Example, you have a healthcare facility or an ambulance services or a small health facility which you're providing in this conflict zone. You need water. When the whole community doesn't have water, food, electricity, anything, then how are you going to run the hospital? How are you going to run your healthcare staff? Bring them in to work there in this situation. And you need oxygen refilling, continuous oxygen refilling. And also the problem is, in a conflict zone, when there's bullets flying, having an oxygen cylinder is not good. It can explode, but there's no other options because there's no electricity, so you can't use oxygen concentrators. So there's no go. Then you can rely on oxygen concentrators. You need to make sure, oxygen cylinders. You need to make sure you have a constant resupply of them, and biomedical services if required. And maintenance, in case a vehicle breaks down, anything, or generator breaks down, you need to have some maintenance work, fuel for running constantly, and also spare in case you're running ambulances. We realized later that we don't have tools and tires and everything. So that is a big problem for us, and also maintenance work. So all this should be in place when you're planning, and you need to think about all this stuff. And last but not least is staff. When you give a call for coming into a disaster or conflict zone and work in a conflict zone, when they already know it's not safe, they come up with high enthusiasm. They come up with thoughts that the day I go in, I'm going to be working in the conflict zone. I'm going to do something, because they come with full enthusiasm, motivation, and everything. And then you get stuck in the border for 1-2 weeks to get into the country. That's what happened in Gaza. 2 weeks we were waiting. In Sudan, 1 month they're waiting because they didn't get access. And so there are a lot of problems in some contexts. Or in Ukraine, it took us 4 days to travel from the time I entered the border to go to the place where I have to work. So there's a lot of downtime. This is when the people get, so healthcare staff get agitated, or they go into depression. And also there's constant bombings, and they have to go and take shelter. So there'll be sometimes in Ukraine, we have 5 hours to 10 hours in a shelter. So that also plays up with your mind. So you need to make sure that you have good staff buddy system in place, and you have good count of all the staff, and you have a good system in place where you know all the staff. Briefing, debriefing is there every day, and you know how to take care of the mental and physical well-being of the staff. So we need to ensure that is there. And also the security of the staff, all the staff. So they go together, they come out, they have identification vests, everything. And if needed, they need to be a place to get them out, medical evacuation. While it's very difficult to get them inside a country, how are you going to find? You need to find ways how to get them out immediately, because if it's medical evacuation, they need to be evacuated as soon as possible. So you need to have a system in place for that, which is the biggest concern for me in any of these contexts. And most important is neutral nationalities. Like example, in Ukraine, we found we can't take most of European countries to work in Ukraine. So that is also a problem for us. So you need to find neutral nationalities, or you need to even in Gaza we have the same problem. So finding staff already is difficult, and then all these restrictions and finding neutral nationalities is also a difficult thing. So we need to think about this, have a pool system in place well in advance. It's not during the conflict, well in advance, to address those issues. So we had a system like where we had pets, and we had downtime. Even during when we were in the bunker, we used to have discussions, we used to have games, we need to be playing, we had singing competitions, everything. So it was a fun time. We made it fun so that there's a good mental well-being of the team. And also we try to engage them in other activities, like just when they're downtime, they don't have any, because they don't have access to the front line and they're not doing care. So we try to tell them to teach the community on first aid, or do food distribution, humanitarian distribution. So then they get a sense of purpose, that they're doing something, not just simply sitting in the rooms and lockdown. So this helps to engage them. So it's very important to have their mental well-being. And last, when you don't have a healthcare facility, and the healthcare facility is being destroyed in the country, like in Gaza now, 80% of the healthcare facilities have been destroyed. Now you need to come up with a system where either you set up a healthcare facility like EMT teams. WHO has EMTs, so they go and deploy as a full system. There's type 1, type 2, type 3 teams, so they can go deploy and provide care. So the same thing at Red Cross, we have emergency response units. So this is can be deployed in 24 to 72 hours. And we totally have 6 types of ERUs. So one is for WASH, in case you have something to do with water, sanitation, everything. You have WASH, ERU, then logistics, then relief and health. And the other one is communication and base camp. So sometimes we might deploy all the 6 units, or sometimes it might be only water, sanitation, or health. It depends on the situation where we need. And even in health, we have types like EMT type 1, that's the clinic, or we have even type 2, where we provide with the whole hospital services with surgical care, everything. So we have both the types of systems which we can deploy if needed. So you need to have the system, and you need to practice well with your team and be ready in case if needed, you can deploy them in case of a conflict. And last, as an emergency physician from India, I haven't seen any of these type of injuries during gunshot. I haven't been exposed to gunshot injuries at all, though I learned about them. But when I went in first time to Gaza, I saw a huge number of gunshot injuries. So it's always important to have people on the job trainings. In case if this happens, how to do. Yes, it's a conflict. You're in the middle of a conflict. Everything's going to haywire, but still you need to have something to provide on the job training, something how to do, how to take care, how to treat these patients. And also sometimes you don't have all the equipments needed, because I work in a good health system, and suddenly you put me without any equipments, no electricity, anything, and you need to provide treatment care. So you need to go back to basic first aid and everything. You need to go back to the basics and then provide at least the minimum care which is possible, and then transfer them out to get other surgical or other higher care. So this training is also very important when you do it, and we need to have people to provide this. Example, when you have a downtime, when there's no access, or even when you're off time or break time, you need to have this on-the-job training so that we can refresh our knowledge and be ready to respond. So these are the challenges and some of the ways we can respond and deal with these challenges. Thank you, everyone. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Srihari, for the enlightening talk just now. Some of the things that you mentioned, like access, healthcare in danger, some of the things that you do to mitigate the risk. We'd like to discuss that further after this. For the meantime, I would like to request everybody, the attendees, to send in their question through maybe either the chat box or through the Q&A panel. So while we're waiting for the question to come in, so maybe I'll go to Dr. Ciottone first. So I have, you mentioned just now about preparing for the unknown. For example, you mentioned about this autonomous weapon, which wasn't there before. Now we have it. When you mentioned that, I immediately it reminds me of Skynet from the movie Terminator. So we talk about it as a entertainment now, but it can be a real threat in the future. So my question is, how do you see that we are preparing for the unknown? And what do we use to measure our preparedness for such unknown hazard or risk in the future?
So that's always a very difficult thing, to prepare for the unknown, right? And as I had said in my talk, that what disaster medicine is today is nothing like disaster medicine was nearly 30 years ago when I first entered into the field. So it's hard to predict what the unknown is. But one of the things that I like to wrap up many of my presentations with is this concept of right now. And I use the example of the sciences, say back in the 1500s, right? So science then, we knew just a little bit about maybe math and physics and chemistry and biology and whatever else. And it was actually possible to be an expert in more than one discipline. Leonardo da Vinci comes to mind. There were others who were actually at the pinnacle or expert in one or more, or two or more of these different, sciences at the time. Today, that's probably not possible, right? Because the sciences, we know so much about each of these different sciences that it's pretty much in fact it is impossible to be at the pinnacle, to be an expert in more than one, right? So an expert in physics and chemistry, an expert in biology and math, whatever it might be. But there are valleys between the two that we don't have a lot of knowledge of, the bridge, between two of these areas. The example I like to use is astrobiology, right? You can go now and get a degree in astrobiology, which is essentially a gap or bridge between astrology, astrophysics, and biology. What is that? Is that aliens and life out in space? I don't know. But the reason I bring this up is now I believe the same is the case for disaster medicine. I think now we know so much about disaster medicine. We've advanced so far that there are specific areas within it, whether it's emergency management or advanced trauma care or sea burn care, or whatever it might be, that there are gaps now in between that we need to bridge. So I like to use the example of technology now. You brought up these autonomous drones that I mentioned briefly in my talk. There are preparedness and response technologies out there. Right now, today, I would suggest to you that I probably don't know about, but would have a very good application in disaster response. So therefore, I think we need to try to bridge those valleys. While we continue to increase our knowledge in different areas of disaster medicine, we need to bridge those valleys, between these areas so that we can bring in other specialties and other specialists, I should say, around the table and understand that. If there is for example, a technology out there right now, very advanced, that would have direct application in disaster medicine that I don't know about, well, we need to remedy that. We need to bring that expertise in. So I guess my suggestion is, for the very difficult task of predicting what the unknowns are going to be in the future, one way we maybe will be able to do that is to again bring other related specialists around that kind of preparedness, mitigation, preparedness, and response table, so that we are best prepared for what the unknown might be.
Thank you so much for Dr. Ciottone for that. So basically, is getting all the experts sitting down together and discussing what are the risks and what are the things that we can work together to mitigate those risks.
And maybe if I could just add very briefly to that,
sure.
And not just that, but also bring in new specialists, new areas of expertise. We've started an initiative here in our fellowship program called Counterterrorism Medicine. And we started to look at that because, somewhere around maybe 2014, I think, or so, we saw this escalation in terrorist attacks, but not just escalation in the attacks, but an escalation in morbidity and mortality, suggesting a new sophistication in the way that these attacks are being planned and implemented. So, multimodality, asymmetric attacks, that sort of thing, to the point where we felt that, healthcare needs to have an equally robust preparedness piece for these unique modalities and unique attack strategies, because otherwise we're going to be left behind. So creating this idea of counterterrorism medicine, very distinctly saying we are not counterterrorism, but healthcare really needs a seat at that counterterrorism table. So again, we're trying to fill in one of those gaps.
Understood. Thank you so much, Dr. Ciottone, for that enlightening answer and discussion. There's a question here from Yong Zi Liao. I think Dr. Srihari has answered this a bit, but I would like to have Dr. Hannan to comment on this as well. So the question is, for the medical mission, how do you address the issue with clean drinking water, since there is the need for medications too? So maybe Dr. Hannan can share your experience during your experience in Myanmar.
Cambodia.
About this? Yeah, sorry,
yep.
Cambodia. Yeah.
No problem. So basically, if you look at water and sanitation, it's one of the goals for SDGs, which is SDG goal number 6, clean water and sanitation. So when we want, because there's unnecessary disease and death happening due to contamination of water, consumptions of contaminated water. So in our experiences in HBB, what we did was we installed hand pump water to the rural area. So that is one of the ways of getting clean water in that particular community. Other than that is installing water tanks. So those are the projects that rendered necessary for sustainability projects or development within the rural communities. But I think Dr. Srihari has commented this, the best way is to chlorinate. I just read out this one. The best way is to chlorinate the water and later boil the water before you drink the water. So that is from Dr. Srihari. But more on our sustainable projects. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Hannan. We have also a question here from Ferdinand. I think it's directed to Dr. Srihari. What do you recommend for operational continuity? Example, business continuity planning guidelines or recommendation? Dr. Srihari?
This mainly depends on what type of organization what type of work you're going to be doing there. So based on that, we need to come up with the guidelines, and it is indeed different for every organization. It's not a cut, copy, paste system. But I think most of the leadership programs have come up with guidelines stating that how to do this program, and that's based on those guidelines only I have based my talk on. So if you need, I can share these. There's some papers written, I can share those papers. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sir Dr. Srihari. We have another question here regarding dialysis. It's from a critical care nephrologist, Mark Romain. Regarding dialysis, it becomes an issue with an acute disaster, both with new acute kidney injury patient and chronic dialysis. How do you deal with this? So maybe I think Dr. Hannan, can you address this question?
Well, I have not have any experience on dialysis, so I think I refer to the other panel. I have not have any experience on this.
Dr. Ciottone or Dr. Srihari? Anything on this?
Again, I don't have personal response experience with dialysis, though I do know that becomes a big issue, obviously, with the earthquake response and some others. And I recall a number of different responses dating back even, again, more than 30 years ago, where dialysis was an acute issue when dialysis machines were brought in and highly sought after. So it's a complicated thing. The very little experience I've had with it is down in the Caribbean, where there are some plans in place to actually, because when a hurricane comes through, let's say, it tends to have a certain track, will hit some islands and not others. So there are among some of the islands these contingency plans where dialysis patients are brought from the affected area, affected island, let's say, and brought into these other islands, for their to utilize their dialysis infrastructure. But again, I don't have a lot of personal experience with that. Maybe Srihari, you might.
Yeah, for at least in a humanitarian context, dialysis is a big thing. And then we go back into a context of thinking mass casualty management. What is possible with the limited resources available there? And if this guy needs dialysis, he needs to be going out of the context. He can't be there. And if it's a vulnerable patient, then we don't know. They can't get access. It's not available. So we need to find other ways. But most of the conflicts where we are working or in humanitarian situations, there's no dialysis at all. There's not even basic healthcare facilities. So dialysis is a very way above to think about. So even minimum basic surgical care is what we are thinking about. And an example, if you take now Gaza context, there's no electricity, there's no all this. So there's only way for this patient to get dialysis is to get him out of the context, get him out of the place to somewhere where there's electricity, everything, and where there's facilities to provide dialysis. You can't bring that into the situation where everything is changing every day. So it's not difficult to bring it.
So it's challenging to manage those type of patients. So since you mentioned about managing the casualties as well as the victims, bringing them out. So maybe you can address this the next question from Brahima. What about management of dead bodies, basically, when you were on the ground? Yeah.
So management of dead bodies is a very important thing. And first thing is we need to give them dignity. you can't just leave them there open, lying down everything. So they need to have dignity. So we need to put them in body bags, or also culturally appropriate care. So some places, like, they just put them in a body bag. Some places they have a white cloth, which according to the religion, they have to cover them in white cloth and then put on a body bags. And some of them needs to be buried. Some countries context we burn, cremate them. So it depends on that. So it is very important. But in case of it depends on the context of whether it's a terror attack or whether it's a war or what kind of a situation, and whether it is a pandemic, how you dispose of the dead bodies also is very important. And also forensics in the dead body management is very important, because sometimes what we collect might be the last things to identify the body tomorrow. Because let's take even a war or a disaster which happened, sometimes the whole family is gone out, died, or this thing, or there might be one relative away and he needs to know where the family is. So if you need to trace back the person or identify the person, so we need to know what is remaining, and we need to have this personal items identified, tagged, bagged, and kept it well. And there should be some forensic records maintained and noted, and kept. A record should be there. And then they need to also note where they're buried, whether it's a mass grave, whether they're buried individually, or whether they cremated him. So we need to know that, and then we need to document those. And if it's buried, then later, if the relatives need, they can go back after the conflict. Like in Faroe Islands, I know that after 40 years back, they went back and they identified the dead and took the bodies of the soldiers back to UK from this place. So it's still possible to do the identification and tagging and this thing. So it's very important for us to maintain this while disposing the dead.
If I could add to that, I agree completely with everything Srihari says. I would also add that having some cultural awareness of where you are would be very important. Unfortunately, and when we've looked at this a little bit, a lot of the responders or response organizations don't necessarily give cultural awareness training and good prep. And understanding the impact of death of loved ones in different cultures is extremely important, because different cultures handle the dead and different processes around the dead, whether it's rapid burial or it's other aspects of their cultural way they culturally address the dead. It's important to know that, because that can cause a tremendous amount of psychological stress on the survivors, especially with sometimes when bodies are trapped in, say, in an earthquake, trapped under the rubble for days and other aspects. So understanding the culture, I think, is a very important piece of it.
Yeah, interesting that you mentioned that, Dr. Ciottone. Going back to Dr. Hannan, coming to a foreign country, and coming from such a small and quite young organization, how do you prepare your team in terms of preparing them to be accepted culturally by the people there, and to deliver your aid effectively in a situation which is very foreign to you?
Yeah. So basically, in terms of Cambodia and the Cham people, actually we share the same principle. It's the same Malay Champa. So it's sort of like the same, culturally almost similar. So there have not been much of an issue. But then again, what we need to understand is we need to understand the cultural diversity, as well as addressing to such differences if have within the local community. So what we do is we get to meet the head of the village and have some pre-council meeting, getting to know what are the barriers, what are the things that are not to be done within that territory, within that communities, as opposed to what can be done. So those are the things that we prepare our volunteers before coming for any humanitarian projects. So that's what we do. Basically getting in touch with the local communities, especially the local leaders. So get to know the basis, the differences, or managing the diversity on that point. Yep.
Thank you, Dr. Hannan. I have a question here to Dr. Ciottone through a PM. management tips for vulnerable population in a complex disaster area, especially psychiatric or disabled inpatients. Dr. Ciottone.
Thank you. Well, I'm actually going to combine that with the next question as well from Vincent Torres, who I think really hits the nail right on the head with that question. But to talk about management of vulnerable populations, et cetera, those are obviously the most vulnerable, and the best way to understand how to manage them is to have some understanding of what vulnerable populations exist in the area that you're responding to. So this backs up a little bit to the idea I was talking about with building local infrastructure. As we say, left of boom, so pre-disaster, if you can have various things in place, one of which would be the understanding of what are the vulnerable patients that you have in your community that can be relayed to responders and the response system once the disaster happens would be very important. So you'd have to know that they're there first, and then plan to give the maybe unique care that they might require as far in advance as possible, and just understand that they are a different kind of population, particularly with the mental health aspects of things that you need to plan for. When I was commander of my DMAT team or field disaster team, we had psychosocial personnel on the team, for instance, that we brought to deployments. But let me jump real quickly to Mr. Dr. Torres's question here, this idea of it's not a question, it's a comment, being critical the medical teams partner with emergency management and disaster response and management practitioners because they're the experts in planning, preparedness, and continuity of operations. I absolutely 100% agree. And in fact, I think this is where, we talk about the two realms, right? Humanitarian medicine and disaster medicine. I think this is where the two merge together. So where I have seen breakdowns in international disaster response has been when very effective humanitarian groups, teams, et cetera, who are in place and maybe have been in place pre-disaster, then are not able to flip into that crisis mode and effectively and efficiently respond to the disaster. I will tell you that Dr. Srihari is a unique person, and his colleagues and those that do the work that he does are unique. He and they are where we meld together disaster medicine, humanitarian response, that idea of what Srihari does, complex humanitarian response, right? These complex disasters. I will tell you that Dr. Srihari is trained in disaster medicine through our program and has always been a star. But see, it's the humanitarian groups that are able to integrate emergency management into their practice are the ones that can be most effective in responding to these crises. And not all humanitarian groups do that. And so I think, again, the comment is spot on. As I said when I started my presentation, disaster medicine is the marriage of crisis healthcare and emergency management. You cannot have one without the other. And when it comes to crises and disasters, you have to have some degree of emergency management, that you use in your operations to be effective and safe, and to do essentially the best response you can do. So I commend that comment. Thank you for making it.
Thank you, Dr. Ciottone. I think we are very short of time. I just take one last question here, which I actually missed earlier, from Philip McGovern. So I probably ask this to maybe Dr. Srihari. How do you address the orphans and individuals with special needs of water? You mentioned you answered it on typing, but maybe you can explain this a bit.
Yeah, thank you for asking this question, because it was one of my major things, the wheel of emergency care, which I told is protection. It's protection of the vulnerable population. So it can be children, women, and elderly, and also people with disabilities and mental illness. So all these people are vulnerable or special populations which we consider, and we need to protect them. And it's so as a healthcare staff, I'm already overwhelmed with other activities. So in my organization, we have something called protection team who comes in. There's like a social worker comes in, takes care of that population. Specifically, we need to have examples. Children often they need to have a special place where they're kept in, because there's a lot of trafficking of children and young women. So we need to prevent that. So we need to keep them, and also we need to find places like orphanages which can take them. or it's also the imperative of the government and other NGOs also. In case my organization can't deal with it, we deal with other organizations. So you need to have this coordination between different NGOs, because there are a lot of organizations which are specialized in only taking care of children, all the orphan children or vulnerable population. So it is need to have this idea, like Greg said, we need to have experts from everybody and have this emergency management and plan in place before itself. It's not that during the conflict, I'm not going to be searching, oh, which organization is taking care of the children, vulnerable children or population. So that's very important. Why I'm telling this is because during Ukraine conflict, we had to transport around 72 disabled children, all children, small babies to 5 years of age, and we had to get them out of the country. And it was good that the government was ready to pay for them and take care of this disabled children until the conflict gets over. So it is not an easy job. You need to get the families out. You need to take the caretakers out. And how are you going to transport all of them? And transporting these disabled children is very, very hard. So there's a lot of systems in place which needs to be done before you take this step. And example, you can also have a system in place where you can evacuate them out of the context. Like we did in Gaza, like we had 2 to 3 evacuations of patients, like example, the dialysis patients. We had small babies who have been evacuated outside the country. But once you evacuate, you need to know how the process to get them back. So this was the biggest problem in Haiti, where most of children and patients were evacuated, but everybody forgot to bring them back after the Haiti earthquake. And people are stranded, and some of them never knew where the patients were evacuated to. Some of them gone to US and some other countries. So you need to get them back. So that's also very important. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Srihari. So, ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, that's all the time that we have. We would like to continue for further into the discussion, but unfortunately, we are limited in time. So again, I would like to thank you all our distinguished speaker for coming and sharing their experience, giving their talk on their experience as well as the knowledge that they have. And also thank you to WADEM Southeast Asia Chapter for organizing such a wonderful talk and event. Hopefully more will come soon in the future. But for tonight, unfortunately, I'll have to end the session for today. Thank you so much again for everybody who attended this talk. I think the recording will be posted in the YouTube very soon. For those questions that we unfortunately unable to answer, we'll try to answer that and probably email it to the person asking. For that, thank you so much again for such a lovely talk. We'll see you very soon in the next webinar.